Today on Law Weekly, we trace the development leading to the judgment of the Supreme Court on the constitutionality of the value-added tax, VAT, and the possible next steps. On our interview segment, legal practitioner Bamidele Aturu gives his perspective on what issues should concern the National Conference. All this and more on this episode of Law Weekly on Channels Television. I am Shola Sheeli. Now let's begin with a recap of some of the top legal stories in the news.
We begin with the report that the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has adjourned till May the 5th the suit filed by the Chief Judge of Rivers State, Justice Pt.1, challenging his suspension by the National Judicial Council. Justice Adeniyi Ademola fixed the date after listening to the submissions of lawyers in the matter. The judgment became necessary after some of the respondents told the court that they had not been served with the court processes. Justice Agumagu sued the NJC and members of the NJC's panel set up to investigate the allegations against him. The suspended Chief Justice also wants the court to grant him an order of judicial review for the purpose of quashing the query and his letter of suspension. It's interesting to note that Justice Agumagu is still occupying the seat as Chief Judge of Rivers State, as he and the state government continue to insist that his suspension is illegal and unconstitutional. From issues in Rivers State to Edo, the Court of Appeal in Benin City last week, Wednesday, upheld the appeal of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, when it ruled that the former governor, Chief Lucky Igbenedion, has a case to answer over allegations of financial impropriety. In a unanimous decision, the panel of 3 judges led by Justice Helen Ogunwumiju ruled that the former governor should return to the Federal High Court to face trial for money laundering, misappropriation of funds, and abuse of office. The EFCC had approached the Court of Appeal sequel to the judgment of Justice Adamu Hoban, then of the Federal High Court, Benin City, who dismissed the fresh charge of money laundering filed against the former governor on February the 8th, 2011, on the grounds that he had entered a plea bargain with the EFCC and that the fresh charge brought against him amounts to double jeopardy. The appeal court, in upholding the appeal of the EFCC, ruled that there was no agreement between Igbenedion and the EFCC and that he would not face trial on fresh allegations and revelations. From Edo to Abuja, the federal government has filed charges against the son of the late head of state, General Sani Abacha, accusing him of unlawfully receiving about 446.3 billion naira allegedly stolen from government's coffers between 1995 and 1998. In the 9-count charge before the High Court of the FCT Abuja, the federal government accused Mohammed Abacha of dishonestly receiving stolen property and voluntarily assisting in concealing money. Justice Mamman Kolo has fixed the 29th of April for the arraignment of Mr. Abacha. And in Lagos, the suit filed by the suspended governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Malam Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, at the Federal High Court, seeking to stop the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, FRC, from investigating his tenure, did not go on last Friday. That's because the courtrooms were thrown into darkness as there was no electricity supply from the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, and about 9 power generators installed in the court. The situation made the parties in the case to agree on Thursday, April the 17th, for hearing. Many other lawyers and litigants who had come for other matters before the court could be seen milling around, complaining about the poor conditions. And we round off in South Africa, where Olympian Blade Runner Oscar Pistorius was back in court to testify in his own defense. The athlete has told the court that his girlfriend, Ariva Steenkamp, did not scream or shout as he grabbed a gun and fired shots that killed her. Prosecutor Gary Nell said it was improbable that she would stand in the bathroom saying nothing while Mr. Pistorius was just 3 meters away shouting at her to call the police. Mr. Pistorius said he could not explain, but reiterated that she did not scream. State Prosecutor Gary Nell, nicknamed Pitbull, countered with accusations and said Mr. Pistorius was lying about the events. At some point, Judge Tokolize Masipa called a brief adjournment after Pistorius got increasingly emotional, eventually breaking down in audible sobs. The double amputee sprinter faces life in prison if convicted at the Pretoria High Court of the murder of Steenkamp, a 29-year-old law graduate and model.
Welcome back. In other legal news, the Supreme Court last week Friday struck out a suit filed by the Lagos State government challenging the constitutionality of the value-added tax, VAT. In this next report, we trace the developments leading to that judgment.
Value-added tax, VAT, is a form of consumption tax. From the perspective of the buyer, it is a tax on the purchase price, and from that of the seller, it's a tax only on the value added to a product, material, or service, the purpose of which is to generate tax revenues to the government. Revenue is therefore at the heart of this issue.
I must thank you.
The Lagos State government contends that the VAT Act Cap V1 laws of the Federation 2004 infringes on its power to assess and collect taxes on the supply of goods and services within its territory. Indeed, there are two suits, one between the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria (MAN) and the Lagos State government, and another between the bottling company and the state government, raising the issues of double taxation. These cases are still pending. It was to resolve this issue on the constitutionality of VAT that the Lagos State government approached the Supreme Court. In 2008, the state government invoked the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and in a suit filed against the Attorney General of the Federation and the 35 Attorneys General of other states, Lagos sought to nullify the power of the federal government to collect VAT in the 36 states of the Federation. Lagos State argued in its brief before the court that the federal government lacked the power to make a law for the collection of VAT in the states and could only do so in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. The state also claims that its House of Assembly, to the exclusion of any other legislative body, is the body entitled to enact laws with regard to the imposition and collection of tax on the supply of all goods and services within its constitutionally defined jurisdiction, and that no other body or government is entitled to a share of such tax as may be collected. The Attorney General of the Federation, in its notice of preliminary objection, however, challenged the competence of the action, contending that it relates to acts of a federal agency and cannot therefore form the basis for invoking the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. The federal government also argued that the suit was an abuse of court process which ought to be dismissed. With the Supreme Court upholding the preliminary objections of the federal government, the issue is far from being resolved. What remains to be seen is how the state government will react. There is the option of trashing out the cases at the lower courts until a final conclusion is reached, or it may follow one of the decisions of the Supreme Court and initiate a suit against the federal agency, the Federal Inland Revenue Service, at the Federal High Court.
Another issue that was in the news last week was the indictment again on violation of human rights handed out to the Nigerian Army and the Directorate of State Security (DSS) by the National Human Rights Commission. The chairman of the commission was speaking against the background of the killing of 8 ACPO squatters who the security officials claim were members of Boko Haram.
The commission decides and hereby orders to be paid by the government of the Federation the sum of 10 million naira as compensation for each of the deceased, or 80 million naira in respect of the 8 deceased persons. And for each of the injured survivors, the commission orders the award of the sum of 5 million naira, or a total of 55 million naira. There is no credible evidence to suggest or show that the victims in this case were members of Jaliswaj or involved in direct participation in hostilities. They were therefore protected civilian non-combatants.